good morning everyone and thank you for joining today's webinar. Today we are presenting webinar on Mastering Design Thinking organized by Applied Science and Humanities Department of Parul Polytechnic Institute, Parul University. Design thinking is a deeply human process that taps into abilities we all have but get overlooked by more conventional problem-solving practices. It requires an experimental, collaborative, and optimistic mindset, which is the ideas and attitudes that a person approaches a situation. So the main agenda of this webinar is to understand design thinking, which is an innovative problem-solving process rooted in a set of skills. I, Vaishali Nathwani, would like to introduce today's guest speaker, Vishantini Tangavalu, a senior product development engineer, a design thinking coach, and a certified trainer. She has completed Masters of Engineering in Chemical and Bioprocess Engineering from National University of Malaysia and have 5 years of progressive experiences across industries. She has also experienced as a head of Department of Product Development at Synergy Engineering, Kuala Lumpur, and former HOD of R&D Factory 12. She is a certified HRDF trainer, design thinking, ideation method, and research management. She is also founder and podcaster of the Innovators Minutes. Moreover, she has 4 years of experience as a research and development engineer in developing new product concepts and test methods, refine and improve current products as well as troubleshooting process, control and parameters. Besides focusing on automation and digitalization with enhancement of economic analysis, being a project manager, she also is a part of major contribution, especially in the chemical facilitated projects, in scheduling and coordinating projects as well as upstream projects. She has achieved 2 awards for Spotlight on New Technology Awards at OTC 20. She has 4 patent filing for new development products as an inventor. She has developed 5 new products of natural rubber examination glove and developed new testing methods for process parameter enhancement. She is highly motivated, result-oriented, team player, and professional chemical engineer with diverse set of skills across oil and gas upstream industry and also rubber raw manufacturing. It's a privilege to welcome you, ma'am, and you can start with the session.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vaishali. So that was a very thorough introduction. I did not expect that much of introduction, but thank you so much. Yeah, that saves up a bit of my time introducing myself. So yes, so throughout this webinar, y'all can address me as Visha. So I'll start with our webinar today, which is on mastering design thinking. So I don't have to give so much of introduction on design thinking because you already gave a brief introduction on the definition itself. So just let's move on. So design thinking is something I believe that it's, I wouldn't say it's so common. It's still like some of them not so familiar with it. So let's just run through, I'll just reveal through what is exactly design thinking and what is the implication of applying in your commercializing your product or your processes or any of your services for the matter. So moving on to the next slides. So this would be our agenda today. So I'll briefly run you through on the power of design thinking. So before even jumping into the definition of design thinking, so I would like to give you an overall outlook how is actually design thinking impacting the businesses out there. So I'll give you one case study. So there'll be a lot of case studies that I'll be giving throughout this webinar so that you have a better understanding because we are not running a workshop here. So based on case studies, you have better understanding what is exactly is design thinking. And then we will move on to the definition on what is exactly defines design thinking and few key principles. There's 4 key principles for design thinking. And also on the mindset, how do you actually change your mindset? Because if I'm being an engineer myself, if I'm going to go, I'm going to be very theoretical and very practical, being very rational. But in design thinking, you have to have a very diversified mindset. You got to look a bit on the rational, yes, analytical mindset, yes, but you also have to got a bit on the emotional. You got to use both on the right brain and also on the left brain. So we're going to see how we're going to actually change this mindset. And of course, we're going to look into the process of design thinking itself. So there's a total of 5 process of design thinking, which we'll go through one by one how they actually, because when you're running a workshop for design thinking, it's based on these 5 steps of the process of design thinking. Next slides. Just a little bit about myself. Like I think Ms. Vaishali have actually went more in detail. So I just want to tell that currently I'm actually a senior product development. So by nature, yes, I'm a chemical engineer, but I'm a researcher. Whatever I'm doing right now, I'm a researcher in oil and gas industry, developing new products for production enhancement. And I have this year will be my 6th year experience in oil and gas and also polymer industry, which is especially in rubber industries. And yes, I trainer and coach for design thinking. And the host of the podcast would be my new venture because I've just started my podcast channel, which y'all can check out. And so do follow me on my podcast channel to get more details. So my podcast is going to be, I'm interviewing a lot of innovators, sharing or pitching about their ideas, whatever they have ventured it across all the industry, not only in oil and gas, but any industries, especially in energy industries and everything. And I would be interviewing the researcher, the innovators, along their journey in order to commercialize their product, because it's not a very smooth journey for you to commercialize a product. For you to start a product from the scratch and up to commercialization, it's a very long journey. The innovation process, it has to be right for you to commercialize a product. So they'll be sharing, the innovators will be sharing more on their journey on this. So that's all about my podcast. So do follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can also follow my Instagram page for Innovators Minutes. And do follow my LinkedIn page because I'll be sharing a lot of ideas and posts and articles related to the design thinking and innovation process itself. So you'll get a lot of insights on it. And moving on to the next page. So let's begin with our webinar for today. So I hope you all have a very ready mindset because it's going to be a bit heavy, but let's just go through a bit more. Next slides. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, I want to give y'all an overall picture of what is actually design thinking. So the case study I'm going to share here today is Netflix. Netflix, why Netflix? Is because it's very close to us. All of us, now that it's a pandemic and everything, I think we all are so hooked up to Netflix. And so Netflix actually actually applied design thinking. So how do I say this? So for you to have a better understanding, I'm giving you an overall picture. So in early stage of Netflix, their competitor is actually a Blockbuster. It's another company which is called Blockbuster. They also shares, but they are cable provider. So you can stream based on the cable. If you buy the cable or install the cable of Blockbuster, you can stream to the movies. But what Netflix started off, in early days, Netflix was a service that delivered movies to customers direct to their doorstep by mail. But why would someone order from Netflix and wait for a few days when they could actually stream a movie anytime, right? So Blockbuster, like I mentioned, the competitor of Netflix. So Blockbuster held fast to its business model, where Netflix pivoted into design thinking. So this is very much later. So that I would say in 2010, actually Netflix realized, oh, why am I actually delivering my movies to the customers when I can do it better than what Blockbuster is doing? So what they actually did, in 2011, Netflix began to create its own content, original movies and series, which changed the entertainment landscape as a whole, I would say. So recognizing the customers were hungry for better and more provocative content, so groundbreaking shows like, for example, Stranger Things, I'm sure you all have heard of Black Mirror, Orange is the New Black. So these are the series originated from Netflix, actually shows that were far too provocative for primetime networks, that were devoured by the audience itself. So that was in 2011. So they thought, okay, maybe we can actually start with our own content. And in 2016, they did not stop there actually. In 2016, Netflix actually changed again, rebuilding its initial interface to capture customers' attention. From the second they landed on the site. So like we actually, when we land into Netflix, so what we actually see nowadays is that we will see that instead of offering a still images or series of posters, they actually added trailers that launch as the customer starts scrolling. So that will actually give you, oh, why not watch this movie? You actually will stop because the trailer is playing. You actually will stop to watch, and then you was like, oh, then it will interest you because you'll be choosing what kind of movies. It's normally based on recommendation from friends and families, right? But instead, it's the interface is so easy. While you're scrolling, actually there'll be trailer being playing. So you just stop for a while, just trailer 1 to 2 minutes. You will want that will interest you. And then they also leverage into artificial intelligence and predictive analytics to create a unique experience for each viewer based on the customer's viewing habits. Because you watched, I'm sure you have seen, because you watch, you recommended, there'll be one column where because you watch this is 90% or 96% it's relevant to what you have watched on the previous one. So they give you some recommendation of movie which is almost the same genre, because it actually detects the types of the genres you actually watch on Netflix. So for example, if you like comedy or you like romance and all these sort of things, it recommend you based on that kind of genres, which is convenient for you. So because you enjoy that kind of genre of movies, it recommends you. So actually, Netflix landed on all this innovation by actually using design thinking to empathize. So this is the first process in design thinking, which is the empathize. They actually look into again on the end customers. What would the customer like and everything? So if we look now, they are so far more better. If you ask me on comparatively with Netflix or Amazon Prime has their advantage as well. But if you see Amazon Prime, they have their advantages on, they have this ranking of IMDb ranking inserted into that. They also do have trailers and everything, but you got to click an option. Unlike Netflix, it actually plays on the background. So it's two different interface, but you see how Netflix actually developed. And if you're looking into this, I just want you to remember, because Netflix is very close to us, right? So the next time you're tempted to think that your business is fine relying on the same old strategies to deliver future success, remember the story that actually Netflix overcome Blockbuster, and the last Blockbuster, like I mentioned, it's another channel like similar application like Netflix. They in the country, I mean, it's in US. They closed this year. I mean, probably in 2020. Recent headlines report that more and more people are ditching cable in favor of using Netflix and for local station. Remember, this has all happened in less than a decade. That is because Netflix was staying, it was revolving accordingly as human also was evolving along the time with the technology. It was catching up with the revolution as well. And they were applying this design thinking because end of the day, their customers, the end users re-watching it, they're making it easier for us to watch. So you see, they have launched trailers, they have launched because you watched, and this sort of things. So they have actually implemented design thinking to empathize again and again with these customers. So it's easier for you to remember what is design thinking than it's actually on Netflix. So just remember that. So I'm moving on. Can I see the slides? Is the slide sharing stopped?
Let me communicate, ma'am, with the sir.
Okay.
Because he was sharing the slide. Might be network issue. Give me 2 minutes, ma'am.
And no problem.
Emergency network issue.
Ken, I think he's back.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. invite.
Okay, you can start
Yes, ma'am.
sharing.
Maybe network issue. So,
No worries. Can probably you can start from page number 6. I'm not able to view the slides yet.
One minute, madam. Here I'm presenting the presentation again. You can check.
I can't view the slides. Okay. Okay. You can give it the slide mode. Okay. So sorry for the interruptions earlier. So what we have talked earlier is on the Netflix as the case study to have an overall look. So how Netflix actually was revolving along the time by applying design thinking. So you can see they are being adding features and so that it's so convenient for us and for us to just glue or stick to Netflix all the time because it's the interface it's so user friendly. So we often will be thinking, what is design thinking is used for? It's not only for business, if you ask me. Design thinking can be actually used for any processes in your, if you are in a manufacturing plant, the overall process itself, or any product, which is very common, product, new product development, or any services for that matter. So if you're looking at services, for example, in education field or in medical field, any service for the matter, in any social networking services, if you're having any NGOs, so how they want to deliver or to be engaging with this rural area, for example, NGOs. So you want to do the entire service, the entire how to be more engaging with these underprivileged children, for example, in social activities from NGO. So, you can actually do design thinking on that process itself. It's not necessary products and new product development. So like what Einstein have said here, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So this will be the best example that I'm going to give you. Nokia 3310, if you look at it. 20 years back, Nokia has just gone out of the market because they're not keeping up to the trends. But you look at what Apple's have done. Apple is actually one of the company that actually implemented design thinking because they were revolving along the time with their designs. It's, people will still buy Apple regardless how much its price is, right? Why is it? Because that they're revolving, it's up to the date. The designs that you're looking at, if today it's so convenient for people, it's been upgrading and evolving along the time because they actually applied design thinking. But if you look at other companies, like for example Nokia, Fujifilm, they were not keeping up to the space. So that's why we cannot use the same kind of problem solving method that when we used initially when we created them. We have to change according to time. So that's when you keeping up on design thinking. It's one of the innovation process, but it's a little bit more extra than the typical innovation process that you're using. So moving on to the next slide. So I believe I gave you an overall what is design thinking. So it's a bit more for you to understand on the definition itself. So what I spoke all about Netflix, Apples, and all this, right? So they all come back to the basis that they will come back to the end client, the end user. The end user is us, the customer. They give so much of importance to the end users. So it is known as a human-centered approach. So there are a few common ways you can define design thinking, if you ask me, but the most favorite one, the people will define design thinking as the human-centered approach. Like what I've mentioned, they will give importance to the end users. Whatever is it, you start with the end users, you get the problem statement from them, you interview them, you create a bond with your end users to get more details out of it, and then you want to solve the problem for them. So that's why it's a human-centered approach. Otherwise, then what's the point? You actually developing a service or a product, but it's not being a user-friendly to the end user, right? So it's starting off on the right track itself. And then, of course, it's a problem-solving process, like I've mentioned. It's a bit an extra because it has different types of tools, different types of methodology that you actually designed accordingly. Like when I say the 5 phase of design thinking, you actually design them accordingly for different scenarios. That's what you actually do in your workshop. So it's a little extra, different types of methodology or problem-solving process. And I said like an empathetic study. An empathetic study, it's more of be empathize, or you have connection with your end clients, with your end users. You try to custom design accordingly to meet the requirement of your end users. And experimentation, yes, experimentation is, of course, you will come to a stage where you prototype your product or whatever that you've been testing based on your ideation, you prototype and you keep running your tests. So when you run your tests, you keep redesign again and again and again because you want to satisfy. It's not like at one time you launch it, it'll be perfect. No, once you launch it, no, you will get more feedbacks. And then you come back again, you redesign, and then you get more feedbacks, redesign. And that's how you actually fulfill the entire interface of the end client. And of course, it's a hands-on collaboration. Collaboration here, what I meant is, it's often good to have people from a diversified background to come up with the ideation process. If let's say, imagine a group of engineers coming out with an ideation process, it's going to be people, they're going to think, everyone is going to be on the same page. Everyone's going to think the same way. They're all going to think about rational. They're all going to think about economic analysis, cost cutting. It's very centered because engineers' mindset, any engineer's background for the matter, everyone is going to think the same way. We all are very rational, theoretical people. But let's say if it's in the ideation process, you're involving not only engineers, but for example, from someone from HR background, they have different expertise, different backgrounds. So different sort of collaboration with different mindset, actually you will come up with a better idea if you ask me, because you empathize people from different prospect and different is a divergent kind of thinking because you don't come out from the same expertise of background. So this is all combination of all this. It's what actually is the design thinking. Moving on to the next page. Yes. So you have an overall outlook here. So we're going to look into this 5 process design thinking very much later in our webinar. But like I've mentioned, this is like in a summary, an interdisciplinary team. Like I've mentioned, not only engineers, but it could be anyone from HR, from finance, from admin teams. And then they look into users the appropriate tools that fit the situation. So facilitator during the workshop of the design thinking has this responsibility to use the appropriate tools depending on the problem statement, of course, and develop new solution for a defined problem statement in an environment that allows free thinking, learning, and creativity. So you need to instill or actually create such an environment where people actually come up with new ideas. You cannot be so creative in a very congested environment. You need to create an environment where everybody's on the same page and they have a very conducive environment where they can talk. For example, the tools that you prepare, for example, if it's in a physical workshop, you will have different kind of brainstorming types. Or you can have like tools like sticky notes. I'm sure you have seen a lot of sticky notes. Design thinking itself, in Google itself, a lot of sticky notes will come and you paste it and everything. So you have to have that conducive environment. Otherwise, people will not be able to create ideas, and which follows a process. So there's a process outlines where you will actually go through later with the right mindset, of course, with the right team, of course. You need a very engaging team, of course, and also, like I've mentioned, an environment. So this all makes up a good design thinking workshop end of the day where you can actually come up with a very good commercialized product, if you ask me. Moving on. So a little bit of relationship between design thinking and innovation. We know we talk so much about innovation, but why is it there's a term called design thinking, and might as well we say innovation, but there is some fine line would actually that involves innovation and design thinking. If you look at it, the yellow point here in the middle is what shows the collaboration between design thinking and innovation. So it has three main points that you're looking into here when you're talking about innovation and design thinking. So user desirability, the product should satisfy the consumer needs. So of course, like I said, human-centered approach is design thinking. Definitely the end user has to be satisfied. And then the second point is the viability, the market viability, if you ask me. The market viability is successful products require an integrated marketing strategy that identifies the target segment. So this is more on the target of market research and market segment itself, which we'll do in the initial stage. So very much in order for you to, let's say if it's a product based, this is not very much on the services or anything, but it's more on the product base itself. If you were to market your product, you definitely need to do a bit of your market research. So market viability has to be there, and of course technology possibilities, technology that provides state-of-art tools for designers to innovate and build products that meet today's need. So what if you ask me, user desirability, market viability, and technology possibilities, combination of all these three factors, it's what makes a very good product that will be make sure the design thinking workshop will be successful end of the day. So moving on to the next slides. A little bit on the benefits of design thinking, like I mentioned earlier. Design thinking, like if you could relate everything back to Netflix, then it's very easier for you to correlate on the benefits of design thinking. So of course, like I've mentioned, the approach of design thinking is not only on business, it could be on educational, in fact on personal development. You can also have applied design thinking, and also on social context, like I said, those NGOs and everything, any social context, you can actually apply design thinking, not only on business scope, could be every other scopes. So definitely it fosters creativity and innovation because it all lies in on the ideation process itself. So definitely that's creativity. And then often cited as the healthy middle ground of problem solving. Yes, we are solving a problem end of the day because we're innovating something new with a good methodology process. And of course, we put human first. So what happened was IBM. IBM is one of the company in US. They actually have a team of design thinkers, design thinking team. They actually have their own internal design thinking teams. So what they actually do, they will come up with all this innovation process and everything, right? So what happened by implementing design thinking in IBM, they actually could discover that they consistently cutting costs, reducing risk, and ultimately increasing profitability by applying design thinking. You know why you ask me? Typical innovation process that we're applying it nowadays, if it's not design thinking methodology, it might take a longer time. But with design thinking, it takes you not 4 to 5 months for you to commercialize something, compared to a typical creative thinking problem skills might take you a year. So you imagine a lot of resources or investment that you're putting in, and it's not going to do good for your business. So do you believe that they have actually calculated the ROI for the year of 2018, ROI of more than 300% overall in IBM by applying design thinking itself. So can you see how much of advantages there, because they could actually, instead of having it 1 year of research, they could make it 6 months. That saves a lot of money and resources. So of course they actually can see they could market the product twice as fast as without applying a design thinking. So by applying design thinking, you could your timeline is shortened by 50%. Of course, you generate more revenue, right? So this is like one of the implications, or you look at the power of design thinking in the revenue of the business aspect itself. So moving on. So you looked at a few statistics that prove design thinking actually pays off. So I'm just going to go to very few of this. For example, the most successful brand. Point number 4, if you looked at, the most successful brands actually uses design thinking. So I'm going to name you a few. IBM, like I've mentioned earlier, Google for the matter. Google also uses design thinking, and they have a design thinking team in Google itself. Airbnb, which I'm going to share a little bit more in detail about how Airbnb actually uses design thinking and how they actually generate revenue out of it. PepsiCo and Nike. So PepsiCo, right? So they actually, these are the brands, successful brands and widely successful brands that consider design thinking a core part of their culture and a way of doing business, if you ask me. So former PepsiCo CEO Indra Nooyi famously told one of the interview that I've read, one of the interview with Harvard Business Review interview that I've read, one of the articles, that design had a voice in almost every crucial decision the company has made. So during her 12 years of tenure, the sales actually increased 80%. So for example, I'm giving you, because PepsiCo is worldwide, right? So when she was doing some research in Japan, for example, so what happened was, normal vending machines that we have, the typical one that we know is like you just can view it from outside, what drinks you want, and you just put in your money, your coins, and then you get the drinks that you want. But what actually PepsiCo did, because like I said, design thinking is a very human centric approach, right? So they actually have, of course, technology has advanced, so they use some artificial intelligence. So it's like a touch screen kind of vending machine. So people will key in their details. So it will store your details. So the next time when you go and you key in, so you will recognize, oh, so the previous time you actually bought this drink. So why not? It will actually give you a recommendation, like what Netflix does, what kind of recommendation movie to watch, right? So this vending machine also does the same thing. It gives you a recommendation. The previous time you actually bought this drink, why not you try this? So in the same time, they're actually doing the marketing, because people might not aware what are the new drinks or what are the new flavors has been there in the market. So by you buying vending machine and you click, you probably want to go to the very typical flavor that you always drink. But the machine actually says, why not? Last time you actually purchased this time we have something new. The machine actually interacts to you. It can actually speak. I mean, it's common nowadays. So it'll tell you, why not you try this? It's a new flavor. So you see how it has incorporated marketing into that. So that is more of like two-way communication, if you ask me. So it's something like, we didn't even think vending machine will do that much of things, right? You'd rather want to be, you're thirsty and you just want to go and then get a drinks and drink. But you see, it's a bit of extra there. They've actually do the branding into the vending machine as well. So these are the things of where they actually came out with this. They applied design thinking methodology in the innovation process, and they could actually get it done within like a 6 months period. And of course, it differs in demographics. So this was in Asia, and depending on each country's locations and favorability. So what have in Malaysia's flavors might not have in India. It differs. So they do that kind of studies. So what kind of flavors do Asian likes? What kind of Europe countries would like? So this kind of human-centric approach, they do a lot of studies on that. So that's pretty much on the statistics that prove design thinking PRs. I'm giving a very simple example, which is on the PepsiCo. Moving on to the next slides. So just a little bit on the principle of design thinking, which I've actually have touched most of these rules earlier. So like I mentioned, I keep saying human-centric approach. So the human rules definitely, because the end user, end of the day, is the human, it's nobody else. The ambiguity rules, which I mean is, it's that you got to think out of the box a bit. You cannot be so constrained that you're from this background. If let's say you're from medical background, then you so focus on medical, but if you forgot a forecast from different industry. Sometimes what happens in oil and gas industry, you may think that oil and gas industry it's not advanced in this, but you never know. Maybe medical industry is already advanced in this kind of technology. So you actually can have a bit broader perspective, apply what medical industry have applied into this oil and gas industry. So you just gotta mix and match a bit, but you gotta be a bit open out of the box, because if you so stick into oil and gas, then you're not going to go anywhere. You're still going to be stick into this. So you got to apply a bit out of the box kind of rule. And also the redesign rule, like I've mentioned, you gotta keep redesigning, because every time you get a feedback from your end client, you come back and redesign, because end of the day, you need to satisfy your customer. And the tangibility rule, so making ideas tangible in the form of prototypes enables designers to communicate them more effectively. So this one will look a little more in detail during the prototype stage. Moving on to the next slides. Like I said, design thinking mindset for innovation is so important. I think I've elaborated enough in my earlier slides, especially think and act in a human-centered way, which I've like keep saying that because at the end of the day, design thinking is all about human-centered way. Collaborative in diverse teams, which I've mentioned earlier. So how does an engineer thinks, an accountant thinks, or an HR thinks is different perspective. So it's good to have a collaboration in diverse teams when you're running a design thinking workshop. That will be giving you a better ideation process. Explore this problem space. Just go a little bit, dig in a bit more on the problem space. You got to do a lot of qualitative research and quantitative research. And then also on the learn through experimentation. Like I said, it's so good to do experimentation because before you actually bring it to the market, you got to run few series of experimentation with different variables to look into the how good or how valuable is your product, and embrace uncertainty. So a lot of uncertainties occurs because sometimes what you thought at the prototype stage, you think, oh, this is fantastic idea. But when you go test in the market, actually people, no, we are interested in this. Or when you also have to have a futuristic thinking on this. For example, when you are innovating a process, ideation process now, it might take a research for you to be commercialized another 5 to 6, not so long, probably another 3 to 4 years, perhaps. So 3 to 4 years. So you got to think not at the current time. You got to think a bit future. In 3 to 4 years, do you think people will actually like this? So you got to fast forward your thinking skills a bit rather than looking into now current. Go a bit future. So by the time you innovate that, then it's a current trend at that time. So you got to embrace certain uncertainties on that. So you got to have a futuristic thinking, if you ask me, and of course envision radically on future, uh, how to say, radically new future, like what I said, futuristic thinking. So that's a bit on the you got to have this mindset for innovation. Otherwise you're going to be so rigid and you're going to be have a very one leap at a time. You will not have a very diverse leap at a go. So that's one thing. Next slide. So this diagram will actually give you a better outlook. You look how business thinking and how design thinking and how creative thinking is. So creative thinking is what typically innovation process that people always will do. But you look at design thinking, it has both. It uses both sides of the brain, which is the left and the right, the artistic and also on the mathematical, the scientific kind of theory, and a bit of arts here and there. So it uses both ways of thinking, which I found it's very rational and practical for you to innovate an idea. And also it has to be a bit of rational and structured, I think I've mentioned earlier, and a bit of emotional and intuitive thinking as well, because it's human-centric approach, right? You gotta be a bit closer to the human. You gotta have a bit of emotional touch so that people actually remember. So that's one way of doing it. So iterating between analysis and synthesis, you got to balance it up between both. You can't only focus on one analytical and one synthesis. It has to be happy with both, so you actually have better products. So this is like an overall mindset that you have to instill even before you actually go to the workshop. So moving on to the next slides. Like I mentioned, design thinking, before you actually innovate the product, you got to innovate your process first. So by innovating your process, you actually increase your profitability, reduces your costs, improve efficiency and productivity, increase job satisfaction, enhance the value of the product itself. So you got to innovate your process. The process here I'm trying to say here is the design thinking methodology itself before you could go into innovating your product. So you got to make sure that this base here, it's perfect. Then everything else is very smooth in innovating your product. So moving on to the next slides. I'm going to have a little bit introduction on design thinking, where it's going to touch on the 5 phases of design thinking. So before going into each steps, let's have an overall outlook on the design thinking video itself. So we shall play the video and you have a better understanding on the 5 phases of design thinking. I don't think so. There's volume, is it? Is there volume? Okay. Yeah.
Design thinking is a person-centered approach to designing outcomes and experiences to delight the customer. How does it work? 1. Empathize. It starts by putting yourself in your customer's shoes. By empathizing with people through observation or open-ended interviews to uncover what people do rather than what they want. Because if you ask people what they want, they don't know. By immersing yourself in your customer's world, you can understand their needs, gains, and pains. 2. Define. Once you've empathized with your customer, you need to filter out the non-obvious insights. What's the aha moment from the observations? What's the problem to be solved? 3. Ideate. Now we know the problem, what are some solutions? The best way is to diverge and look at all possible solutions, no matter how out there. Then converge into solutions that are desirable, viable, and feasible. 4. Prototype. Now we've got some solutions. Let's bring them to life in the cheapest, fastest way possible. 5. Test. Now let's go back to the customers and ask what they think. Let's test their reaction to our prototype. Design thinking starts with the customer, then offers the solution, not the other way around.
Okay, so the next slide. So that video typically actually says an overall of the 5 stages of design thinking. So there are 5 stages, which is the you empathize, which is more of the what you can look into. Can you share the slides? Okay. So this slide actually says the 5 part, which is understand and observe, comes under empathize. Point of view is actually defining the problem statement. The third one will be the ideate, and then prototype, and then test. So storytelling, pilot, and business model is a later part of the implementation itself. But the design thinking workshop, so this is where the workshop will actually start. At this point, so the facilitator, for example, if myself, I'm conducting a design thinking workshop, so I will probably have like an overall, what am I going to work on? For example, if it's a climate issues and something like that, green technology, climate issues. So that's my bigger topic. So I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to do some empathize, understand what's exactly happening. So what is the complaints and everything, and then you observe, and then you can record it down. So there are few tools for you to implement at this section. And then you move on to defining the problem statement. You got to define your problem statement, and then only you move to ideation process. So if we look into the next slides, it gives you an overall view. So we will have you, these are those tools that we use at every stage. If you look at the observe or the understand, the first part, you can see the few tools, and then observe, there are a few tools. See, in understand, it's mostly on the interview section. So to make it easier, understanding, you collect like qualitative data. So probably you interview with your end clients, if it's in a business scope of view, you actually can do like a questionnaire form and send to your clients and ask them to fill up, this is the problems they're facing and everything. And then you do some sort of empathy map where you observe. So these are the problems, these are the pains, these are the gains based on their job scope. So you can actually do an empathy map. You can do like a canvas profile. And then you actually go and defining the point of view, which is what is the problem statement? How do you define problem statement? There are a few tools you can use, especially in how might be. So how might be, it's in the very strong tool to define problem statement. And then you move to ideation process. Ideation process got a lot and lots of tools that you can actually use in ideation process for it to be very interesting. So the entire workshop of design thinking, the best part is the ideation process. You keep engaging during the ideation process because there are lots of type of ideation techniques, or called brainstorming. You know, the typical way we always do brainstorming, sticky notes and mind mapping. That's a bit boring, but there is a lot more of tools that you actually can apply, and it'll be so much of fun. for you to do during the ideation process itself, and then you go into more tangible. So the idea, you actually make it into a more tangible outlook, so people can actually picturize what you're saying. So in my case, well, actually normally what I do in prototype, of course, experiment and everything, it's one part of it. That's only testing. But for me to do some sort of storytelling to my clients, so this is my new product development, this is what I've done. So probably I'll do some video editing. I'll probably do it in a video concept. Or I also actually use a 3D printer. I actually try to print it out in a 3D printer. So I actually have a 3D model itself to actually show to my client. So actually just one way of prototype. So instead of you fabricating the product, which is going to cost you so much of money, why not you do in 3D printing? This also replicates your product. So in that way, you don't spend so much, and you can actually prepare a storytelling and tell to your client this is how it's going to look like. So you just have to upscale it even in the actual case. So that's on prototype. So of course you do your testing through your experiment and everything until you're convinced with your results. And then of course you go into the market. So that's an overall outlook. Moving on, let's look into next slides. So I'm just going to go a bit detail. I've already explained earlier on all the processes. So like empathy on the understand, it's more of like you walk in the shoes of the potential user. Like I've said, you do like a user profile canvas. You got to do what's your pain, what's your gain based on the job scope. You prepare like a profile canvas, so you try to make more than 10 to 20 users, so that you have different varieties, because different users have different needs. So you cannot fulfill one user's needs, because your customer is not going to be one. You need to have an average. Then you got to know, you do your analysis. Oh, this is the common problem out of the 20 to 30 people that I've interviewed. So these are the common problems. So this is what you should focus on end of the day. So that's the reason that you actually have to walk in the shoe as a potential user. You don't have to do it thinking, or don't assume. It's better not to assume, because what you're thinking, they might not be thinking the same. So you got to really go and interview, collect the qualitative data, and make sure you have an understanding with the client, because when you're doing at an early stage, the same person is where you're going to test your product. So it's good for you to have an engagement here itself. So that's on the understanding. So on the next slides, you look a bit on the observe. So how do you observe? So one of the tools, trust me, there's a lot of tools on this. I'm just giving you one or two tools for example, because if let's say we're conducting a workshop, then I'll be designing the tools which is will suits for the problem statement for the day or whatever we're going to work on. But this is, I'm giving you very generic tools. There are one tools that you can do analyze, which is called vocals, AEIOU. So you can use A for activities, E environment, I interaction, or objects, U user. So what you do is you use this 5H and 5W and 1H questionnaires kind of types. Those wives, and normally we call it as 5 wives, 1 husbands, right? So you can use that tool to iterate back with your AEIOU tools, asking what happened, what are the people doing, what is your task. So these are the questions. And another thing that I need to emphasize here is you need to ask the right questions to the right person. You need to don't ask unnecessary questions where it's not going to relate back to your ideation process. So you need to know what kind of questions, and do ask the right questions. So that is the purpose of the tools here. So you need to ask the right questions, so that will be actually useful in your ideation process to develop your services, your product, your processes. So moving on to the next one. So defining. So you're defining your problem statement, your point of view. So when you define your point of view, you analyze the information from what you gathered earlier in your earlier part, during your observation, during your understanding. Analyze those information, infer some insights, do some discussion within your groups. So I'll do a bit of discussion within the groups. So analyze the information. So think a bit more ahead. So what will happen if if we don't apply this? What will happen? We'll do a bit of statistic analysis. So this is the most common problem that we can see. If it's not so common, we just put it aside. That is for future references. So you've got to put a bit of info insights and formulate some possible questions. So how might we is the tools that normally are used. So how might we do this? How might we do that? So that will actually define, and you specify your questions. So normally what I will do is I'll do some voting, like a dotted voting. So let's say when you have few, how might be you come up with some possible questions. I let my participant to actually vote which one would you feel it's the common problem and everything. When we specify the questions, then we actually already define the problem statement for the day. So moving on to the next one. Next slide, so you can see. So this is how it's going to look like. You analyze information, you gather here all these data, and then you infer some insights, formulate some possible questions, sentence 1, 2, and 3. Then you do some voting sections. You do some voting sections over here, and then you have your problem statement 1, 2, and 3. So then it's easier for you to actually do your ideation steps. So moving on. When I said when you already have how might be, you already define your problem statement. So these are the ideation process. So ideation process typically will take half a day or a day if you ask me, because this is where you're going to use lots of tools, because I like to use a lot of tools if you ask me. So these are some of the tools that I actually use, but there are actually more to this. There's more than 20, 30 tools that you can actually use. But of course, you look back at the types of the teams that you have. If it is like now that we have virtual workshops and everything, right? So it's a bit difficult for you to you got to define what tools you want to do, and you got to explain to them before it starts how does it works. But if it's in physical, then it's more engaging. It's more fun actually. Because you can communicate, you can play games during ideations and everything. But during virtual, it's a bit restricted over there. But you still can, because there are some tools, bots like Miro bots are very user friendly for design thinking workshop. So I use a few of this reverse brainstorming that will actually give you a very good highlights on problem solutions. Associate thinking. Associate thinking is one type of ideation tool where, for example, I'll just ask my participant to name one of the whatever objects in front of them. For example, glass. So if you see a glass, what do you think of glass? You see it's clear, it's opaque, it's clean, or it's very brittle, it's very fragile. You just name the characteristics of the object, and then you relate it back with your problem statement. So how to overcome fragile, how to overcome this. So you just got to relate it back here and there. And right brain is more of like a word storm. So whatever you see, if it's a climate change, so what you can think of climate, hot, global warming, greenhouse gas emissions. So you just keep doing some word storm out of it. Then you got to relate back here and there. So the process has few stages of ideation, but eventually you will actually come into a more tangible idea end of the process. So moving on. So yeah, another part of the ideation process, you got to do your idea screening matrix. This is a bit challenging. It actually makes a lot of difference in different industry. If let's say we're doing for educational background, for medical background, for engineering background, because I have a lot of experience in engineering background actually to run my workshop. So on engineering backgrounds, normally we'll do idea screening matrix. We look into, we will screen out based on, we have three criteria, whether it's tangible, whether it's user friendly, whether interface is good, whether economical viable, whether we have enough resources, or whether we need collaboration purposes for this, or we look at the lead time. So a lot of factors that you have to consider. So before you actually have 10 ideas, when it goes through a screening matrix, you got to prepare your screening matrix. When you go through your screening matrix, then it actually cancel off certain ideas. So out of the 10, you actually have only 2 which is viable for you to actually develop it. And it's you got to be a little more practical on this section, because you're going to develop it into more tangible. You can have any crazy ideas, worst possible ideas and everything. When you start going into the prototypes and ideation stage, testing stage, you got to have a bit of tangible ideas, which you think it's suitable to develop at this point. So a lot of factors need to be considered. Like I said earlier, whether it's going, when I'm going to finish developing this, when it's going into the market, probably it takes 1 year. So make sure that it's still trending in that 1 year. So you got to do a lot of consideration on this part. So screening matrix is something a bit tricky, but yes, if you know end of the day what you are looking for, what is the objective, and then you're able to do it. And moving on to prototype, the next slide. So we've already at the overall concept of prototype. So prototype itself will take another 1 day, because you're trying to develop something with cut box, or like I said, of course, design 3D printing is another level of doing it. But during the workshop, no. During workshop, 3D printing actually takes some time depending on the size. but that is just not how you do workshop with 3D printing. But what I'm trying to say, during the workshop prototype, so you build with some cardboards, you try to explain, so this is my idea is going to be like, so this is how I'm going to build this. So you got to do a few steps and variations in your prototype, so you're able to do some storytelling. Moving on to the next page. So these are the types of prototypes. You can do sketches, you can do wireframes, you can draft it out, you can do storyboards. And like I said, you can do videos, websites, and apps. That's a different part of it. But it's more of like during workshop, you got to do more of like a storyboard. So if you could build something more physical out of any cardboard, something which is feasible at that point of time, then do it and do some storytelling. Or you can do it in videos or any format for the matter. So, and then moving on to the next slides. So these are the types of the prototypes, the tools that you actually can use. So if you, for example, if you look sketch, if the degree of resolution or the degree of resolution is low, so practically everything you can use sketch. So this is like a medium or the tools that will help you to relate back to the degree of resolution. So if you look into chart, then spaces, processes, structures can use this. So for different types of problem statements have different types of prototypes that you actually can imply. So this you will actually learn more in detail during the workshops and everything. And then moving on the test. Type of testing. Of course, type of testing, you have question map, you can test scenario, you do experiments, you do face-to-face interview. You know, it's more of like a products that you don't need a physical product, but it's more of like a services. Then you do like face-to-face interview kind of thing. Then you document those results, and then you infer some learnings to it. So of course, when you do some testing, when you go outside, you test it, market, test the product. How is it feasible, or is this going to solve the problems? If it's not, then what's the point, right? So you make sure you have to go and check back. So initially when you have you done this questionnaires or interviews during the empathy stage, right? You go back to them. Oh, come on, give you a solution. So what do you think about this? Do you think that this is going to resolve your problem? So what do you think about this? So you document your results. And then moving on to the next part. Next slides. So this is called the feedback capture grid. So when you do some interviews or questionnaires, or when you're doing some presentations and you're getting the feedback, this is where we actually call redesigning back your prototypes. So you redesign back, and then you look back where you can actually look into, oh, this area is not where we're supposed to focus on. You actually can go back again and then do your prototype again, or your ideation stage. It's all a loop by itself, because it's so important for you to capture those feedback and come back and make sure that it's more tangible for you to present. So, and then moving on, the next slides. This on the overall summaries of tools, but of course this is not limited to this. There is more. So like I said, on the understand stage, understand and observe comes under empathy stage, where you have create a persona, the canvas profile I told you. You perform your AEIO, the how, 5W and 1H. When you define your problem statement, use how might we. In the ideation, I gave you a few steps or a few tools there, but of course there's more to it. And then you have your idea screening matrix that you have to develop, and then you develop a prototype. Like I've mentioned, you use different kind of prototypes, storytelling, wireframes, or presentations, anything, videos, just to convince your end client. And then you do your testing. Your testing, it could be a questionnaire where you go face-to-face interview, you show it, and then you get your reflex is another stage whereby you actually look into whatever you document during the testing stage, you reflect back, and then you do again, you reiterate again everything. So this design thinking is actually a reiteration of a process until you get a customer satisfaction. So that is the entire process. But this process will happen because it's already designed in such a way, it will happen very quickly. So it's not been prolonged. So because it's one after one after one, and then you come back, it's a loop, it's a closed loop. You come back again, you reiterate again until you get a complete product by itself. So that is the 5 phase of design thinking, where I've talked on the empathy, which under empathy you have observe and understanding and observe of your end client itself. And then you move to your defining your problem statement, your point of view, and your ideation stage, number 3. And number 4 is the prototype. Number 5 is your test. And of course, the test includes your reflecting as well, and you reiterate the design if it doesn't satisfy your end users. So this is the entire process, product design thinking of process, the 5 stages that you can run during a workshop itself. So moving on, I'm just going to end this webinar with a few case studies so that you have a better understanding a bit more. So I'm going to touch on today's on Airbnb. So do you know that Airbnb came out with this new logo, right? So the logo that you see now is actually new logo. So if you look into it, it's actually, there is 4 simple symbols in this logo. If you read up more, I'll see some of the videos. I remember seeing some videos or I read somewhere. So this Airbnb logo, they do rebranding. So the 4 simple symbols, you actually can see how they defined it. So there is one part, the head, it represents people, number 1. Number 2, it's a location icon to represent the place. If you can look, it will define. If you see the middle part is like a map location, the icon, the map icon, you remember? And the third one is the heart for love. And the entire A is, of course, represents Airbnb. It's a bed and breakfast, bed and breakfast. That's what the acronym is for. So if you look into the branding of their Airbnb, also it's the design thinking, So they actually have the rewards that you get from Airbnb. It's just not financial, but you actually rent it out and you gain some financial gains and all those sort of stuff. But it's actually very personal, if you ask me, for the host and also for the guest, because they incorporate a lot of valuable things. So and Nike, where they actually, we know it reminds us that it's an athletic product and everything. So whatever related to athletic attires and all these sort of things. But they actually came out with this something called they have produced a very first positive culture agenda when it released its very first ever performance hijab. The hijab was designed in partnership with the Muslim female athletes, bringing performance apparel to a segment of the population that had previously been underserved by sportswear brands. So they have, in 2019, Nike have doubled down for a new range of modest swimwear for Muslims. So if you look at this, it came out with 55 types of prototypes for its high-performance victory swimsuit. So they actually were very engaging for the Muslims as well. So populations of Muslims are very high. So they actually give importance to them as well. Before this, they have not really looked into them. But the population is so high. They said, it's worth giving a thought and investing for them as well. So these are all these brands. They actually implemented design thinking into process. So I'm going to end this webinar by watching one of the video of Airbnb, and then we'll end this webinar. So let's watch the video, the last slide. Are you sharing the slides?
Yes, madam.
Okay. So let's watch this video on Airbnb, actually how they actually implement design thinking on this.
Have you heard about Airbnb? Airbnb is known as the largest hotel chain in the world. It's bigger than even the top 5 hotel brands put together. What's more interesting is Airbnb does not have even a single hotel in them. So how did they become the largest hotel chain in the world? The business of Airbnb is very simple. They created an online platform where people can list their houses for tourists to come and stay for a short period. This helped to solve a lot of problems for people who are renting out their houses and people who are renting those houses. And it started with something very simple. They were two friends. They studied together in the university. They moved to San Francisco, the US, for work. They were starting their work and money was very limited. They didn't have enough money to pay their rent because in San Francisco, the rentals are very high. One day they had to travel to a place to attend a conference, and as you can imagine, they didn't have enough money. So they came up with a solution. They bought a few air mattresses. They let people to rent these air mattresses and stay in their home, make money from this, and use that money to fund for the rental as well as for their travel and expenses to attend that conference. Of course, they did make some money, but what also happened as part of this was they started thinking, we are facing this problem, and many other people are also facing this problem. Once they realize that there is a problem that is faced by so many people, they went out, they interviewed people, they realized that, okay, there is a sizable number of people who want to make money, who have enough space in their homes to rent out, and there are a lot of people who want to visit other places but do not have enough money to spend on hotels. That is how Airbnb was founded. And what did they do to found that company? They used design thinking. Today, Airbnb is a multi-billion-dollar business.
So that's pretty much on the video on Airbnb. So Airbnb is now known as a multi-billion-dollar company, but the company founders are also a design thinking pioneers. So when Airbnb was on the verge of flatlining after it was launched in 2009, so they barely was scrapping about $200 per week of revenue. So until when they found this, okay, this is so critical, I'm going to do something about this. So they actually they took a closer look at the site and realized it was full of low quality user photos. So, photos actually plays a lot of roles, right? Because when you were looking for some Airbnbs and everything, you're looking at the pictures. The pictures is what? Because you can't go physically and look. So the pictures plays a lot of roles. So what they do is that the first few times they went physically to the place and they took a good pictures and then they start promoting. So that's when so that's one way of actually applying design thinking and Airbnb, and of course the rest is history. Today it's $1 billion and there's nothing to, it's so established that people always prefer Airbnb rather than hotels, if you ask me. So yes, that's pretty much today about my webinar on design thinking. I hope you all understand on the stages of the 5 phases of design thinking, the importance and how it has given positive impact, like for us, example case studies, Airbnb and PepsiCo have said Netflix should be very close to you because it's something that we are watching on a daily basis. So all these giant companies, even Apple for the matter, you look at the designs, they innovate on daily basis. Google for the matter. So all these companies, brands are actually using design thinking. So if you see, they are still on the market. It's because of this. It uses human-centric approach. So that's all from me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us your valuable time.
Welcome.
Yes. I would like to thank the management of Parlour University for motivating and supporting us continuously. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.